My Lords, and this is I really will be very brief. I would urge the same on that particular amendment on specific risk assessment and some flexibility and common sense. But I actually just wanted to ask the Noble Lord, the Minister, about how you decide how you can have that flexible attitude to buildings. Because I was actually very impressed with the letter from the Noble Lord Minister in relation to places of worship. I thought that it was very sensitively handled. It understood, as it said, the unique work of faith communities and so on. And it wasn't saying that no faith communities' buildings would be exempt, but it understood that they could be treated differently with certain sensitivity for what their roles were. And I think we heard a number of very good speeches on that at second reading that asked the question, well, if you can look at a church and a place of worship in that way, why can't you look at somewhere else like that? Is it not, therefore, or could you explain in a way why we can't have more of that specific risk assessment for types of building, and also an assessment of the importance for community of certain buildings, without that meaning that you're being cavalier about people's safety or public protection? Because already the government's conceded that not just places of worship but also schools and educational facilities are not all being treated the same. And I suppose there's a few of us, especially because I organise events, that would rather that you did that a bit more, with a bit more across the course of the bill. I think that when I heard about this bill originally, one could see and understand it and it making sense for something like the Wembley Stadium, and even though, or something of that nature. But when originally, under the last government, not under this one, I saw that the figure that the figure of 200 of 100 was being used. I realised how many small organisations like church halls and so on were going to be affected, small businesses. And it made me ask the question, which I think the government has rightly answered, which is, you look at all the consultations, all the pre-legislative scrutiny, all of the trade organisations that have been asked have all said there is very little evidence that in terms of safety of small venues, that this legislative regulatory framework will keep people safe. But what it will guaranteed do is actually stymie both entrepreneurship, volunteering in local areas, and make people think it's just not worth organising these events. It's just not worth staying open. So I congratulate the government for having listened to that and raising the standards here from 100 to 200. And I think the question is, precisely in the way that the government listened from 100 to 200, these numbers are not rocket science. And why did you stop at 200? I mean, why not 300? Why not 400? This is not a glib point or to be silly about it or to play games. Because actually, that's why I raised rather badly a moment ago, in terms of the numbers game, that in fact education settings and places of worship are classified as standard duty premises regardless of their capacity, because they are different kinds of premises. So we know it's not just like it has to be to this number or else people will be killed in terrorist offences. The government are prepared to be subtle and flexible, and this bill can be the same. And I think it is worth us probing why you stopped at 200. And I would go higher, because I'm very worried about the sense that it will stymie community organisations who just will fall apart, and small businesses. So you've got a mission of growth, and you keep saying you believe in as a government, and you don't want to be saying to these new companies or the hospitality industry that they're going to have to fulfil over-regulatory bureaucracy in order to survive. I don't think it's that they won't care about their clientele or their staff, by the way. It's just that this bill does not just demand that you think about that, but that you have to fulfil, threat of law a particular set of regulatory mandates, and it's difficult for people. That's what they've all said.
They are making their decisions. Does the noble lady want me to give way? Of course.
On that basis, there would be no numbers or no tiers or no distinctions at all in this particular piece of legislation. One of the most shocking and barbaric actions happened recently with the group of, 40 young schoolgirls, children, at a dance class. Now, maybe if we're going to take the approach of saying that those of us who are trying to seriously probe what regulation would mean, based on numbers, because there are numbers in this bill, does not mean that we want to encourage terrorists to go in and kill people in any circumstance. And just, I think it's wrong, because actually a lot of the terrorist things that have happened recently have happened because we didn't do something before, not because of the numbers of a venue and regulation, for goodness sake.